Welcome to the Jonathan van Bilsen Show, featuring lively, in-depth conversation with compelling guests from our community. And here is our host, Jonathan van Bilsen.
Thank you and welcome. My guest today is Geoff Carpentier, a published author, an eco-tour guide, and an environmental consultant. He's been to all 7 continents and has some very interesting experiences. Geoff, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. Good to see you.
So I need to ask you, because your name is spelled Carpentier, but you go by Carpenter. So what's the history there?
Well, I started my life in French Canada, so it was easy. Everybody could pronounce it. But when I moved to English Canada, went to University of Guelph, nobody spoke French, and it was just too complicated to always explain how to pronounce it. So I anglicized it.
Excellent. And I won't ask about the spelling of Geoff. We'll just let that one go.
We shall.
So now how does one get into the world of nature?
For me, it started very early. I was about 13 years old. I used to go out with my dad. We'd go hunting and fishing. Well, he would go hunting mostly because I was too young. But when you live in Northern Ontario, there's not a lot to do, so you take advantage of the out of doors. Eventually, I found that I really didn't like hunting at all, even when I was old enough, and preferred to just look at the wildlife. And from there, it kind of blossomed through high school and then eventually to university, where my...
And when you say Northern Ontario, so where exactly did you grow up?
It was the Ottawa Valley, Petawawa. I was an Army brat, so we lived at CFB Petawawa, which is very remote.
Right. And you said you went to Guelph University?
Yes.
And studied?
Zoology, which is basically the animal side of the nature kingdom, but I also liked the plant side of it as well. So as time went by, I tried to learn all the disciplines associated with nature. And
what was your intent when you went to university? Like, what did you want to be when you grew up, so to speak? Yeah,
that was always the goal in the 70s when I was there, the early 70s. Everybody wanted to be a biologist, and we all wanted to work for the Ministry of Natural Resources, as it was called then.
Right.
Because you could be outside all the time, you could study nature, and you got paid. So that was kind of the goal, but the reality was it didn't work out. There weren't any jobs when I came out, so I went into a totally different field.
And that field was?
Pesticides.
Okay.
Ironically,
It's sort of the opposite of what preserving the economy.
You would think, exactly. But it was an emerging industry for the government, or for the people and the government itself, and nobody knew much about it. So I was able to shape the program a little bit to focus on nature and try to encourage people to use pesticides properly and to the benefit of nature where they could. Okay, so which of course over the last few years has totally evolved into that. Exactly. People are now much more conscientious about the pesticides that they use and so forth to most people. Most people, yeah, exactly. So you got out of school, you had this great love of nature, and I assume bird watching was a big part of that. Yes. Now bird watching, I remember as a photographer back in the day, to see people with binoculars and not being able to capture a picture, it was sort of viewed a little bit different. Were there challenges in the early days of birding? Very much so. When I was starting my birding in the 60s, to be a bird watcher was weird. You were bullied by your friends, and people just kind of looked at you as if you were strange. So I would sneak out with my bird book in a little pack on my side and my binoculars hidden under my coat, and I would go back into the backcountry and hitchhike or ride my motorcycle later and just get away from people so that I could study it and not be criticized. Right. Okay, yeah. I think as you go through the process of life, maturity tends to set in somewhere. For some of us, it's a lot later than others, but it does eventually set in. It's very interesting. I mentioned to you that I just came back from a trip up north, and I saw some birds, and a lot of people were staring at them, and I found it interesting, to be very honest with you. It's not something I've done before, but to actually realize that they have a habitat, they have a life. It's very interesting to watch, and you do get mesmerized by watching them. So I can sort of see that side of it, but not to have taken photographs would be very frustrating for me. But so you also do a lot of guiding, right? You've been to 80 some odd countries. So how did you get into guiding? Well, when I was still working full time for the Ontario government, I had weekends free, of course, and I would then try to take advantage of weekend guiding trips where I could do something for the Federation of Ontario Naturalists or one of the local nature clubs. And then when I retired, I set a goal for myself that I would really like to do some international guiding and become more of a professional. So just before I retired, I got a call from a company in Australia, and they asked me if I was interested in guiding. I said, yes, I was. And they said, have you ever been to Antarctica? And I said, well, no. They said, well, we'd like to send you there. Can you learn the wildlife? And I said, well, I already know the wildlife. And they go, why? I said, well, because I study all the time and learn about different areas. And so my first gig was in Antarctica as a professional guide.
Wow. I mean, I've never been to Antarctica, so wildlife comes to mind as some walruses, a few seals of some sort, and a lot of penguins. Is there other wildlife there as well?
Well, first of all, there's no walruses. They're in the northern hemisphere. Sorry. Lots of seals there, lots of whales there, and tons and tons of birds beyond the penguins. It's a really, really exciting place. And you also have a lot of aquatic invertebrates and stuff, like little sea spiders and sea butterflies and things like that people don't appreciate. And there's jellyfish there, which would surprise you because you think they would be frozen solid. But it's a very, very versatile habitat down there.
Interesting. So just before we get back into the guiding, you said when you retired, you got into that. So was that retiring from the pesticide business, or?
No, retiring. Well, when I worked in pesticides, it was for the Ontario government, the Ministry of the Environment.
Okay.
So eventually I did all of the jobs pretty much that you would do within the ministry, whether it was air pollution, landfills, whatever it was.
So your career was with the Ministry of the Environment?
It was totally with the ministry. And then from there, then I retired from that and then moved over to this new discipline, which was sort of my life's passion anyways.
Right. So the guiding would be interesting. Now, as I said, I've never been to Antarctica. I have guided people. I've traveled a fair bit. The trek to Antarctica, I assume you go down through the Drake Passage, is that right?
You do.
Which can be a little dicey at times, right?
It can, yes. They have a phrase, it's the Drake is awake or the Drake is a lake. And you kind of want it somewhere in between, because when it's too calm, it's kind of boring. You don't see much in the way of albatrosses because they need the wind to fly, or you don't see the whales very much. When it's too stormy, then of course, depending on your constitution, you might have some challenges. So in between is what you really, really like.
I would be good with the lake. Boredom is fine. I could live with that. The idea of choppy waters, and that doesn't thrill me. So the ships that you take, and I assume it's some type of a cruise ship, probably outfitted specifically, smaller, I assume, than a massive cruise ship.
Yeah, they're generally around 100 to 120 passengers, and maybe 75 crew, which would be guides like myself, but also the cooks and the people that clean the rooms and everything else. So the ratio of staff to passengers is always very high. They're generally called expedition ships as opposed to cruise ships, because the purpose of it is to go on an expedition to get ashore every day at least once and really have an adventure that's fulsome. A cruise ship would look at Antarctica from the rail. Right. And you're still there, but it's a very different experience than being on the shore and walking with wildlife.
Of course. So where do you actually depart from?
You fly to the tip of South America, which is a city
Tierra del Fuego? That area?
You're in Tierra del Fuego, but the city is actually called Ushuaia, which is the southernmost city in the world. It in itself is an absolutely amazing town for wildlife and for if you're a skier or if you love adventure, it's a great jumping off point for it. And then you board your ship, and then you sail out the Beagle Channel, which of course was named after Darwin's ship. Right. And then you head either directly down south towards Antarctica, or on some adventures you'll head east and go to the Falklands, or Malvinas, depending if you're Argentinian or Chilean. Right. And then from there you might go to South Georgia and then come back to Antarctica at the end of the journey.
Okay. And how long is the trek? If you go directly from Tierra del Fuego, if you go directly to Antarctica, how long a trek would that be on the boat?
Usually about 10 days. 10 days is a good length of time. Sometimes you can get ones that will offer you 4 or 5 days, and frankly, you've wasted your money. You don't get to see enough. And you might think that every little piece of ice looks the same, or every peninsula is the same, but they're very different.
Oh, absolutely, I'm sure.
And you can appreciate in your own travels how
absolutely. And the uniqueness of a location, I think, is one of the joys of visiting it. Mm-hmm. People always ask me, which country did you like best, or have you done, what did you do there, or how was that sort of thing? And there is no country that I like best. I always tell people I haven't been there yet. But I find that if you look for the beauty in a place, you'll find it. And the more you start finding that, the longer you can enjoy it. Mm-hmm. Correct. So so you get on a boat, and you cross the channel and you're at Antarctica.
Yes.
And how long would that trek be?
Usually, depending on the weather, about a day. You count on a full day. But on that day, we do the training because you need to know about how to get it in and out of a Zodiac. You need to know about safety on the ship and off the ship. You need to know about the protocols about approaching wildlife or specifically not approaching wildlife.
Right.
So there's a lot of training that goes on the first day, and it's a very useful day. Plus, you get time to go outside and hopefully see albatrosses.
That's amazing. And when you guide, you don't look after all 120 people on that ship, right? You have a group of, what, a dozen or so? Or
No. It's quite different, actually. My job as a guide there is to go ashore with the people twice a day, if we can, and to mingle. So I would wander around. I'm not leading a group around.
I see,
I'm a resource on shore.
Right.
What's that penguin doing? Why is that bird doing that? What's that seal doing?
Okay.
And then on the ship, my role is to provide the same kind of service, but often in a more intimate setting, or to give lectures.
I was going to say, so you'll do presentations on the ship and things like that, give people an idea of what to expect. That would be very interesting because a lot of tours don't have that opportunity, and you end up in a place and, gee, what am I supposed to see now? Or you go with someone who's not that well versed in the area, that sort of thing. And how many times have you been to Antarctica?
Oh, I've kind of lost count, but about 35.
Really?
Approximately, yeah.
So you've seen it all then? There's nothing left to see?
No. It's funny because one time I was down and I had never been inside the Antarctic Circle. I'd been, it's kind of a trek in itself because it takes an extra day there and a day back.
Okay.
And it was so neat to be able to say that I've been inside of both circles now. And not many people can lay claim to that. And it was exciting. Like, even though it kind of looked the same, it was just an exciting imaginary line to cross.
It's something that most people haven't done, and I agree with you. I think most people get the same feeling. You also would have encountered possibly remnants of, say, Scott's expedition or anything like that. There are monuments.
We have lots of monuments. Certainly Elephant Island, where his crew was left, or Shackleton's crew was left when he made his way across to South Georgia. We've landed on that island, which itself is a rarity. We landed at a place called Horseshoe Bay, where, as far as we know, only 200 people had ever been there before us.
Really? Wow.
It was so remote, and it was so exciting to be able to do that. I don't know exactly how many people have been to Antarctica, but it's around 150,000. So even there,
it's a pretty small group. It really is, considering. That's amazing. And you have a book. I have a copy of it here called Antarctica First Journey, which you wrote. It's a beautiful hardcover book. I've had the opportunity to look through it, and we'll put a picture of it up on the screen, and perhaps the information of where people can buy it if they wanted to. But this book is designed for people who either have been, but more so for people who are thinking about going, what will I see, what can I expect, correct?
Exactly.
So it's like a guide for those wannabes for Antarctica.
Exactly.
So I may put this on my bucket list, as long as you can guarantee that Drake Passage is like a lake.
I guarantee anything you want, as long as your expectations are low.
Geoff, we're going to take a short break. Some amazing stories that you've come out with. We will be back shortly, and we're going to see the world through the eyes of Geoff Carpentier. Hello, I'm Jonathan van Bilsen for Photos and Travel, where we bring the world to your doorstep. Traveling during this pandemic is virtually at a standstill. However, thanks to Rogers TV and YouTube, my new show Photos and Travel is heading into its second season. Join me for a new episode every month when we get together and explore exotic locales around the world. Check local listings for dates and times, or visit Jonathan van Bilsen's Photos and Travel on YouTube. Welcome back. My guest is Geoff Carpentier, who is truly one of the last explorers of the planet. Geoff, welcome back.
Thank you.
So the Antarctica portion was very, very interesting, but I know you've been to, as I say, over 80 countries. So let's talk about some of the... Now, your very, very first gig that you did, was there anything different, special about it? Anything that comes to mind?
Well, it was the ultimate Antarctic trip. It was the one that went to the Falklands, to South Georgia, and to Antarctica, which is the most expensive trip. But to be your first trip was amazing. And I remember outwardly I have to be this professional guide and I have to explain the wildlife. and I see my first penguin, and out really go, let me tell you a bit about this penguin. And inside I'm going, oh my God, there's a penguin. And it was so exciting, you know, but you had to keep your emotions under control.
And how large a group would that have been?
It was about 110 people on that particular trip.
And you say it was an extensive trip, so how long would that have been?
I think it was 19 days.
Okay, that's a long time.
Yeah, it is, but it's worth it, because every one of the 3 destinations is different. It's like 3 different holidays packaged together.
And what was your routing for flights?
I don't remember exactly, but usually they go through Toronto to Buenos Aires, and Buenos Aires to Ushuaia, and then you get on the ship and return.
Do the prices vary dramatically on Antarctic expeditions, or are they all around the same?
Well, if you do the short trip, as I call it, which is directly to the continent and back, the 9 or 10 day one, it's about half the price of the 19-day one, which kind of makes sense.
Yep.
So it's a substantial investment, but it's something you will never.
It's a lifetime experience.
Absolutely.
Unless you go 30 some odd times.
Still a lifetime.
I'm sure it is. So you've also been to Venezuela. Now, I understand that you had a bit of a confrontation with an anaconda.
I've traveled to South America a lot over the years, and I always wanted to see an anaconda. It's funny because I had swum in rivers where they occurred, didn't see them. I had walked on trails made by anacondas in previous trips, didn't see them. So at one point I wanted to go and see if I could catch one. Okay. Normally I don't like to touch wildlife, but this was something that I'd researched, and you can handle them briefly, take your photos, and be gone. So we found a place down there in the Llanos, which is sort of the central part of Venezuela where the anacondas occur. And we did our research and found a slough where we thought they should be.
Right.
And it's kind of a tricky procedure, because what you do basically is you get into the mud, the swamp, you have a stick, and you have usually your stocking feet only, and you're trying to either touch a snake underwater with a stick to find out it's there, or touch it with your foot. Okay. And it's kind of neat, actually. So we found our first snake by touching it with our foot. Then you got to figure out which end is the head. Right. So you have to reach down and slide your hand gently along its back. If you get resistance, you're going towards the head. If it's smooth, you're going towards the tail because of the texture on the snake. So we caught it and took our photographs and released it. This was just a little one. This was about 11 feet and some odd inches.
I think we have a photo of an anaconda we can put up on the screen. I have been in places where they've put a snake around your neck and you have your photo taken. And it was a photograph that I had because of video which see me shaking to death. And because an anaconda, like I've seen garter snakes, and you know they're fine at a distance. I'm not sure about stepping on a snake or nudging it with my toe and then picking it up and having. It's an experience, and I'm assuming that they're harmless.
Yes. Oh no, they can hurt you. I mean, they're big enough. This snake was big enough to hurt you, and they can bite. So you really do need to be confident in what you're doing. You don't just go, I'm going to catch a snake tomorrow and do it. So you need to be thinking a bit about the risk. And more for me, I don't want to harm the animal.
Of course.
I want it to be just the way it was when I left. And so with this particular snake, we put it back. And the only person that got hurt was me, because we had crossed, there's a lot of cattle around, and we had crossed this electric fence, and we had checked to make sure that it was off on the way in. Somebody turned it on the way out, and you had to climb over it. And I'm just thankful that I had all my children out of the way by the time I discovered the power was still on.
That can be scary. It's not exactly the sort of misadventure I expected to hear, when you're anaconda searching, but it's interesting. So I've just returned from Churchill, where I saw a slew of polar bears, very, very impressed, only to find out that you were in Nunavut, and you ran into a polar bear by accident as you got off the boat or whatever?
Well, the first encounter I had with polar bears was on Agamaskie Island, which if you look on a map of James Bay, there's a big island sort of in the middle of it. It's spelled Akimiski, but it's pronounced Agamaskie. So we're flying in, and there wasn't enough seats for us. So I got to sit in the co-pilot seat, which was a wonderful spot. And as we're coming in, we look down on the beach, and there's this big polar bear down there, and it's sort of pawing at the sky towards us. And I thought, wow, this is like so incredible, and we circled a little bit to see it. And then we landed really, really close to where it was, because our camp was right there. And then we walked back from camp once we had landed safely and tried to determine where the bear was, and it wasn't in sight. at that point, which is good and bad because you don't really know where it is anymore.
Which is not good.
No, no. So I've had lots of adventures with them over the years, but I've never had a close call. As a guide, we're heavily trained. We understand the cues, the clues that they give us that they're upset. Right. And we always will stay far away because not just for our own safety, but it's all the people that are relying on us.
And you want to protect the environment. I mean,
course.
There's so much, the ecosystem is so balanced that you can set it off very easily. I understand that. You've also gone helicopter flying at over 100 kilometers an hour to spot rare birds.
Yeah.
Now that's quite a speed to be viewing birds.
Well, I went up to the Hudson Bay lowlands a few years ago, and part of it we were trying to study breeding birds up there. And we were on a jet helicopter going towards what used to be Winisk, which is now Powhatan, which is up on the bottom end of Hudson Bay. And there's a distinct bird that has rarely nested in Ontario called a little gull. And it's very distinct from the air because it's all gray on the back, but under the wings is jet black. So from the distance, you can see it. So we're flying very fast, and I see one of these birds below us, and it flips up, and I can see the black wing. Right. So I said to the pilot, can you get me back there? And if you've ever flown over the north, you know that there's no landmarks.
It's just
millions of puddles.
And everything looks the same.
Exactly. Yeah. And this guy did a maneuver in the air, and he brought me back within a few seconds directly over the bird. Right. Not only did we find it, but I was able to look down and see the nest from the helicopter, got some photographs of it, and it was the one of the first confirmed breedings for the species in Ontario because it's an old world, a European species typically.
It's quite a ways to see it.
Yeah.
So the one thing that I'm not sure if I want to touch on it is India and a tiger adventure. And I say that tongue-in-cheek because I did spend a fair bit of time in India. I went to the north in search of tigers, and the most I saw was a footprint because I did not realize there were only some 400 tigers in the wild in India. So I understand that your experience was a little bit different from mine.
We had very good luck. I went there for about 5 weeks through various parts of northern India, and I think we ended up seeing 9 or 10 different tigers while we were there. But one adventure comes to mind because my wife, Kim, was with me on that particular one. And we were lucky to have a local guide who was a senior guide. And that means you might get to go to places that other people don't go because there's always better spots. And they do try to protect the tigers, obviously, and try to keep the intrusion as minimal as possible. So he took us to this area there. And we were standing in an open Jeep, and he was explaining why there was a tiger coming. Right. And it was the barking deer, and it was the macaque monkeys that they smell it and see it long before we do. Right. And they're pointing at this thing. And my wife was saying, what are all these dogs doing around our Jeep? And we were kind of ignoring her. It's like, shh, don't scare the tiger. And so she waited a bit, and she said it again. And then finally our guide looks down, and he goes, oh, my goodness. He says, those are Indian wild dogs. He says, we never see those. They are much more rare than the tiger.
Really?
And so we were very excited about this. Well, while we were taking our pictures of them below us, the tiger goes past us and is now behind us.
Oh, my gosh.
And we knew that because of the monkeys and the deer were now facing the other way.
Wow.
Flash forward to the end of the story, we see the tiger finally crossing the road, and there's one of the rangers coming down towards us. And our guide yells out, get back, you're going to scare our tiger away. And I'm thinking, you're walking there without a weapon, and we're worried about our viewing opportunities. It was kind of a funny end to the story.
It's interesting. I mean, it was very, very sad that I did not get to see a tiger, but the fact that you did sort of reinforces the fact that I now know that they do exist.
They do.
It wasn't just a myth. So I do appreciate that. So your favorite country you had mentioned before we went on air was Borneo?
I think so, yeah. It's hard because, as you've said before, you haven't been to your favorite country yet. Right. But which I think is a great line. But if I had to choose one, I think I would choose Borneo because it's wild and some of the things that are so exotic, like the orangutans, for example, or the Indian elephants that are hard to find, they're there. And if you go to the right place, you see them. And a lot of the birds are big and they're gaudy and they're funny looking and they're noisy and the people are wonderful. Right. And it's a great place to visit.
So tell me about orangutans because they are my favorite animal. So when you take people with you, when you guide people to places like Borneo, the first reaction of seeing an orangutan must be just amazing for people.
It's funny because your first reaction actually is not of wild animals, wild orangutans. What we tend to do on these trips is we take you to a rehabilitation center where there's been rescued animals. They're living in the wild, but they come in for feeding. So at 10 o'clock, you're going to see an orangutan. And it's very different than being out in the bush and seeing your first one out in the wild.
It's like an elephant orphanage.
I've seen
a few of those,
And so the first one, it's more about learning a bit about them, about their biology, about the threats to them. And then when we get into a place called Danam Valley in particular, which is in northeast Borneo, then you have a good chance of seeing a wild one. And then really, it truly is, oh my gosh, look at that incredible animal. Huge, I mean, they're big. And they're way up high in a fig tree, eating figs. And it's kind of comical almost to watch them, daintily picking a fig off the tree. And this huge hairy beast up there. And it's really exciting. Yeah,
they're amazing animals. The babies are really cute too. They really are cute. So with your guiding, you must have had a few experiences that were quite comical with passengers, with your folks that you took with you. Is there anything that comes to mind that you wanted to share with us? Have you lost any people en route?
No. I did have one delightful woman. She was, I think she was 88 at the time.
Oh my gosh.
She weighed about 23 pounds, I think. She was the tiniest little woman. And she was still at her age running marathons, not fast.
Really?
So the problem for me as a guide was she would rush to the edge of a cliff to get the best view. And of course, when you're that
which
tiny,
makes your heart stop, right?
It does, because then I had to explain to her, like, I need you just to stay back here with me. I'll get you close at my speed. And so we never had a mishap with her, but it was terrifying because she was the first off the bus, right to the edge, the riskiest spots every single time. And
I can imagine. I'm sure that when you're responsible for a number of people, it's the lowest common denominator is the issue, and you have to treat everybody at that level. And people do tend to do silly things, especially when it comes to wild animals. I mean, I was in Namibia, and there was a herd of elephants, and this Jeep pulls up right in front of us, and then pulled right up into the path of the elephants. And this female elephant, we thought it was actually going to knock the Jeep over. And people just do silly things when they're confronted by different. So have you seen gorillas too? I
did. I went to Uganda a couple of years ago specifically to see the gorillas. And again, it's that magical moment where, I'm literally this close to a silverback and it looks at me and I look at it, and you make this eye contact, and it is the most incredible feeling you could ever imagine. You can't even,
I know, words can't explain it.
No, you can't.
Yeah, that's amazing. Geoff, unfortunately, our time has come to an end. I'm very envious of what you've done other than the tiger sighting in India. I'm going to pass on that. But thank you so much for being here today. Very much enjoyed it. And I'd like to invite you all to join us next month when our guest is going to be Brent Harrington, who's going to come up with some ideas for the holidays. I'm Jonathan van Bilsen. Thank you for watching, and stay safe.